much. How am I supposed to follow Jenna Ellis? That speech was so good. It was so good. She deserves more applause. She does. It was so great. I loved it. I was sitting there in the green room. I was trying to do work. I was trying to prepare my speech. And then she was giving hers. I said, I can't forget this for a second. I just have to listen to hers. If we have some time, I hope we will. I want to do some Q&A at the end. So we'll try to do that. It'll be a lot of fun. But in the meantime, it's very good to be with you all. Thank you to Liberty University. Thank you to the Freedom Center for the invitation. It is so good to be here in Virginia right now, isn't it? Something in the air. I don't know. It's especially now, like this, the past 2 weeks. I don't know what it is. What is it? Do you know what it is? Yo. Oh, right. It was that election that happened. Yeah, that's right. And despite a major Democrat voter advantage, the Republican won that election, and the Democrat lost that election. Yeah. And why did the Republican win and the Democrat lose? One issue. It wasn't taxes, it wasn't national security, it wasn't immigration, it was education. One of the few silver linings to the storm cloud of the COVID lockdowns is that parents, for the first time in many years, have finally noticed the sort of nonsense that their kids are being fed at school. Critical race theory, transgender ideology, all of that. They started showing up at their school boards to express their displeasure and demand that the teachers cut it out and stop filling their kids' heads with lies and focus on subjects that will actually provide their kids an education. Left-wing politicians who for decades have relied on teacher unions for funding and votes unsurprisingly took the side of the teachers and the administrators. Conservatives took the side of the parents. During a key debate in that election, Terry McAuliffe said he didn't, quote, think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. Not a good line. Not a good line. Glenn Youngkin said he did believe parents should have some say in how their kids are raised. And what happened? What happened? Glenn Youngkin won. But apparently, establishment Republicans did not get the message. The day after Youngkin's victory, the House GOP Twitter account tweeted out, quote, Americans don't want socialism. Pass it on. Socialism didn't have anything to do with it. Terry McAuliffe is not exactly the second coming of Che Guevara. He's a run-of-the-mill corporate Democrat. He's a Clinton stooge, but he's not Vladimir Lenin. Glenn Youngkin did not really run against socialism, no. No, as Election Day approached, the Youngkin campaign focused on education, mask mandates in schools, radical ideologies in the classroom, and the cover-up at Loudoun County schools of an alleged rape, I think more than alleged at this point, I think it's pretty proven, rape in a transgender bathroom. That's what they ran against. Suburban mothers did not flock to the polls to stop the workers of the world from seizing the means of production. They did it to protect their kids. I do not like socialism. I hate socialism is an evil ideology. To quote many of the popes of the last century and a half, socialism is a pest, a plague, a wicked confederacy that seeks to steal the very gospel itself. It's very evil. But not all evil things are socialism. It's like the difference between a square and a rectangle. You know, all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. It's like that with evil and socialism is evil, but not all evil things are socialism. The Youngkin campaign did not win because of some popular uprising against socialism, but because of a new grassroots movement that cares about education. Calls to mind the last great issue-driven grassroots movement on the right, which is the Tea Party. That movement, which began more than a decade ago, focused on economic issues, taxes, spending, debt. It embraced the backronym, taxed enough already. It sent dozens of lawmakers to Washington, D.C. It sent many more to state houses around the country. And it did so on a pledge to shrink the size and scope of government. Unfortunately, despite its electoral wins, the Tea Party failed to change much of anything at all. Establishment Republican leadership in Washington weakened the movement's message, sidelined its leaders, and co-opted its brand. The Supreme Court refused to strike down Obamacare. Thank you, Judge Roberts. The federal government continued to spend and grow. Within 5 or 6 years, the movement fizzled. At first glance, this new issue-driven movement on the right resembles the last one. Upon closer inspection, though, the Tea Party and this new movement, the CRT Party, if you will allow me the pun, it's a groaner, I know, but they're actually not the same. They're actually opposites. Where the Tea Party spoke in dollars and cents, the new movement speaks in terms of culture. Where the Tea Party embraced a libertarian aversion to government, the new movement seeks to wield political power for the good, banning obscene and frivolous books, firing radical teachers, and imposing limits in the classroom. Where the Tea Party extolled individual rights above all others, flying the Gadsden flags and shouting, "Don't tread on me," this new movement defends the political right, not just the individual right, but the political right of a community to set standards with particular regard toward what can and cannot be taught in public schools. Conservatives have learned a lesson from the failure of the Tea Party, and the lesson is this: structural economic change cannot occur unless it is preceded by cultural change. Cultural change not just at the private level, but even wielding government. The Tea Party believed that if we only got our fiscal house in order, we could focus on the cultural issues later: immigration, abortion, gender, sex, whatever. That strategy failed. Establishment types have, in that regard, pursued much the same strategy. Bean-counting eggheads may deride the culture wars, but cultural attitudes will determine economic policy. To rewrite a fashionable conservative slogan, economics is downstream of culture. And the most powerful cultural issue is education. More than immigration, more than drugs, more even than abortion. Those issues matter a great deal to our national integrity and to justice, but they are nowhere near as powerful as education. The only cultural issue that comes close is marriage and the family, and even then, only in as much as those are really all the same issue. Education carries so much power because it's not just one issue among many, it is a sort of meta-political issue. It's a political issue about other political issues. By shaping the minds and habits of whole generations of Americans, education shapes not just one or two aspects of our national policy, but our entire political order. That is why the left is hell-bent on controlling it. That is why the left marched on the universities in the 60s and 70s and 80s. That is why Jesse Jackson led a march across the Stanford University campus, chanting, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, Western Civ has got to go." Campuses are like crystal balls. Look at a campus today, you are looking at a picture of your society in 20 or 30 years. Education is about more than reading, writing, and arithmetic. The purpose of education is to form citizens by training people to be free, to make sense of their freedom. That's why we call it liberal education. That's why we refer to the liberal arts. That's why some universities are called Liberty University. By learning. That's why. By learning to discern truth from falsehood and right from wrong, by subordinating our appetites to our rational will, we elevate ourselves above the other animals and become free. And this exalted freedom, to quote Ronald Reagan, is not passed in the bloodstream. It is therefore never more than one generation away from extinction. If radicals succeed in miseducating the next generation of Americans, to suppress its best instincts, to cultivate its lowest desires, and to prefer lies to the truth, they will render this country unrecognizable. Tax hikes will be the least of our worries. Young people today are extremely confused. Just a few statistics. According to a recent survey from Arizona Christian University, 39% of young Americans between the ages of 18 and 24 identify as LGBT. Something tells me not all of these people were born this way. Unless Alex Jones is right and there is really something in the water, something tells me that this massive expansion is probably more owing to cultural confusion and contagion. A YouGov survey conducted a few years ago discovered that younger Americans, millennials and Gen Z, are significantly less likely than older generations to know basic facts about American history. A whopping 87% of high school students flunked a 5-question survey on elementary civics. Just 35% of these younger Americans could identify the faces on Mount Rushmore. That compares with 71% of baby boomers. Only 11% of these people could identify the rights enshrined in the First Amendment. Coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, these younger Americans also had the lowest levels of patriotism of any group. Miseducated young Americans might not know a single thing about their country, but they know they hate it. They hate it, man. They know for certain their country is bad and in need of radical change. 60% of millennials, for example, believe the U.S. is sexist. 63% say that it is racist. That is a staggering number, even compared with the hippie baby boomers, just 46% of whom say the country is sexist, 42% of whom say that it's racist. Not good numbers either, but compared to millennials, it's child's play. Gets even worse the younger you go. A full half of Zoomers, that's the generation below the millennials, believe that America is not only racist, but that it is in fact more racist than other countries, compared with just 29% of boomers who think the same. And we can make fun of these ignorant millennials and Zoomers, but it's not entirely their fault. It's not even primarily their fault. They're just repeating what they were taught or not taught. This is the consequence of half a century of leftists taking over the education system and laissez-faire conservatives letting them do it. This is the consequence of conservatives embracing the liberal ideologies of openness and intellectual diversity and academic freedom in the classroom. Ideologies that conservatives once rightly mocked as ridiculous, disingenuous, and relativistic, but which nonetheless they've come to adopt in recent decades. This is the sort of thing parents rebelled against in Virginia. During the campaign, Youngkin said he believed parents should be in charge of education. McAuliffe said they shouldn't. It was an honest disagreement. One guy said parents have the right to raise their kids, the other one said they don't, and the first guy won. That's what this education issue really comes down to. Who has the right to raise your kids? That's what the word means. The word education appears in the English language in the 1530s, comes from the French. It means child rearing, that was the definition of it. Comes directly from the French. It comes ultimately from the Latin, meaning rearing or training. It's about the mind, yes, but it's about the body as well. It's about the soul and the spirit as well. It's the whole person. That is why there can be no such thing as a neutral education. It is simply not possible. Right now, it's fashionable to suggest we ought to teach our students how to think, not what to think. I know it's a popular phrase, but it is completely meaningless. It is total bunk. Education always does both. In recent decades, and increasingly in recent years, American education has imbued students with specific ideas and behaviors and attitudes. Among them, the men who built our country are evil, terrible, Columbus, Washington, all the rest, terrible people. America itself is an evil endeavor rooted in white supremacy that must be fundamentally transformed. Men can become women, and women can become men. Objective truth cannot be known, and our perceptions of reality are merely socially constructed. People have a right to do whatever they want with their bodies. Science is settled and religion is bunk. All of these things are taught as gospel truth. Never mind that many of these claims contradict one another. Never mind that many of them contradict themselves. This is what the students are taught. If you contradict those teachings, you will likely receive lower grades, not at this fine institution, but at many others in this country. You might, yeah. Here you'll be all right. You go to other places you won't. If you keep it up long enough, you'll be labeled a hater or a phobe. You'll be kicked out of school altogether, most other places. The conservative response to this poison in the classroom has been threefold. One, ignore it. Two, mock it. And then finally, meekly request that alternative viewpoints be permitted as well. intellectual diversity, academic freedom, all that stuff. That will never be enough. The parents in Loudoun County get it. The voters of Virginia get it. They get that these false ideas are filling their kids' heads with lies and depriving them of an education. They're saying, enough. This new movement is not interested in merely repeating the same lame defenses of procedural norms. It is focused instead on articulating real, substantive goods. America is a good place and we should like it. White people are not born evil because of the color of their skin. Men and women are different. True freedom is not the right to do whatever you want whenever you want to do it. You don't have the right to delusions. Liberty is not licentiousness. Cowardly establishmentarians on the right, they hate this kind of talk. It's so controversial. Better, much better, they believe, to stick with the stale old scaremongering about socialism. It worked in the 80s, after all, and that was a great decade, wasn't it? All that fun fashion and the kind of electronic music. Why don't we just go back to the 80s and play act all of that again? Why not just quit politics altogether and dig up the corpse of Ronald Reagan and have him fight all of our political battles for us? Then we won't have to do anything at all. That's not going to work, folks. That's not going to work. Fear, cowardice, and indifference are not going to work. Bean counting about big government is not going to work. Hand-wringing over the marginal corporate tax rate is not going to work. None of these things will ever fire up a grassroots movement to retake our country from the radicals. The voters of Virginia have shown us a viable path forward. Whether it will succeed, be co-opted, or simply fizzle is up to us. If the Republican establishment has its way, it will be co-opted into just another lame harangue about taxes. If the squishes have their way, it will fizzle into the same old subjectivist nonsense about academic freedom. If it succeeds, it will succeed because conservatives grow a spine, perhaps some other appendages as well, and actually lead. Educate. The word educate is from the root word meaning to lead. That is what is needed now. Without leadership, a family will crumble, a community will crumble, a nation will crumble too. Leadership requires vision and courage, the ability to see where you want to go and the guts to take the steps to get there. Let us pray for both and let us move forward together. Thank you very much. Thank you. Here I come. Thank you very much. Do we have time for Q&A?
If you would like to ask Michael a question, you can line up right here, and we'll start taking your questions. We got about 15 minutes for Q&A.
You know, it's funny. Usually we have this rule, which is if you disagree with me, come to the front of the line. But I'm at Liberty University, so, you know, just, regular file is fine.
Well, hello, Michael. My name is Jack Lawrence. A really big fan of everything that you do.
Thank you.
The question I have today, obviously on the topic of education that you've just mentioned, we've talked, obviously, everyone in here understands that what's taught in the classroom today is going to end up in the courthouse tomorrow. And so on that idea, I've heard a lot today about the topics of what's going wrong in our schools, but not necessarily a lot of what we need to be doing right in our schools, per se. And so I would wonder about the reintroduction of the Bible into our public school system so that we would be able to correct our society and increase our society in the courthouse of tomorrow. And how would you go about doing that?
You've given the answer yourself, but it bears repeating. The way you know that the libs are being completely disingenuous about the academic freedom and the intellectual diversity and all the other ridiculous slogans is that there is one book that you cannot teach in schools. It's not anything by Kimberly Crenshaw or Robin DiAngelo or that other hustler, race hustling guy, what's his name, Ibram Kendi or any of these people. No, it's not them. It's not some radical left-wing text. It's not, no, there's one book you're not allowed to be taught in schools. It's the Bible. It's the Bible. You're not allowed to be taught the Bible. The Supreme Court said so. The font of all wisdom, the root of Western civilization, without which you cannot understand any of the civilization, the most important book ever written, that's the one book you're not allowed to be taught in schools. It tells you everything you need to know. And to the point that Jenna made very aptly, you will never come to an understanding of the good unless that good is synonymous with God. You're playing a fool's errand. And that is what we're doing in education. And the leftists tricked us, and the libertarians went down the completely wrong direction when they pretended that education is basically just a charcuterie board of various disconnected things, and you take a little here and a little there, but it's not actually. Education is all pointed towards something. It will inevitably be pointed towards some vision of the good, and so it's either going to be the left's vision of the good, which is evil, or the right's vision of the good, which is God. And so, yeah, you can't do it without putting the Bible back in schools. I would strongly recommend we do that. And you could do that. Either you get some judges with a backbone to overturn those stupid decisions in the 20th century, or you pass a constitutional amendment or something. But you could do it if you wanted to. The other thing you have to do is have a right that's willing to exercise political power. You got to fire the bad teachers. You've got to ban the bad books. We always hear that banning books is really terrible and illiberal or whatever. And you don't want to ban good books, but you do want to ban bad books. There's book burning in the New Testament. I don't know if you remember that scene from Acts of the Apostles, but a bunch of converts burn all their sorcery books. That's great. That's awesome. I love that. Plato advocates the burning of his philosophical rivals' books. And Plato, I don't know, he's a pretty broad-minded guy. He's a pretty smart fella. Martin Luther, I'm a Catholic, so he's not exactly our #1 guy, but Martin Luther burned books. He burned Thomas Aquinas' books. The Catholics obviously had the list of prohibited books, and we have prohibited books today, and we always have in American history. So I think we bought into a narrative from the left that is just historically untrue and philosophically incoherent, and I think we need to say no. You can't expand the curriculum indefinitely. There are only so many weeks in the semester. So if every minute that a kid wastes reading Ibram Kendi is a minute he's not reading Shakespeare. It's a minute he's not reading something worthwhile that will actually educate him. So we got to learn that word no. we got to put limits there as well. Excellent question.
Hey, how would you best destroy the idiotic Planned Parenthood talking points in just a few minutes?
No, how much time do you have? I mean, we need more than a few minutes they have so many dumb talking points. I guess there are so many of them. The one that you're going to hear a lot, because there's a big pro-life case that's going through the courts, is that before 1973, before Roe v. Wade, thousands of women a year died in back alley abortions, and you want to kill women in the back alleys. It's complete bunk. The guy who promoted that statistic, Dr. Bernard Nathanson, who was one of the co-founders of NARAL, the Abortion Rights League, who then became pro-life later on, he admitted that they just completely made up that statistic. You can actually go to the federal government's website. You can look at the actual statistics. The number of women who were killed from illegal abortions the year before Roe versus Wade was decided is less than 40. Not less than 40,000, not less than 44,000 or 400. It was less than 40. Okay, the number of women who died from legal abortions that year was 24, I believe. It was in the 20s. And if you look at the states where the abortion was legal and illegal, and you look at the population, statistically, you were about as likely to die from a legal abortion as from an illegal abortion, and there were very few women who died of either. So that would be one. You take one scaremongering point right off of the table. The next, I guess, is that the baby's not a baby or something. So it's not a platypus, so I think that one's self-evident, right? He's obviously a baby. And that he's not alive, well, he's obviously alive. He has all of the characteristics of life. I don't think you could really deny that. And it's an independent life. So then the really honest pro-abortion people will tell you, well, that baby, yeah, he's an individual, and he's alive, and he's a human, he's not a platypus, but sure, but he has no right to encroach upon the rights of the mother. This is where all this crazy liberal rights talk leads you, that the baby doesn't have a right to his mother. But I suppose then what that leads you to is Naomi Wolf's position, a feminist who is increasingly heterodox on the left. She says that we need abortion, we need legal abortion, and we need to recognize that it's a baby, and we need to kill the baby in all of his humanity. And I think you need to force the left to take their real position here. And look, I guess it's a fair argument. If you really believe in infanticide and eugenics,
can I add to this?
Please do. Welcome, the great Jen Ellis.
Hi. So
Yes.
not to interrupt you, but I want to add two more points to this from a legal perspective, because Planned Parenthood and all the leftists are going to tell you that abortion is a constitutional right. That is false.
Yeah.
And even Roe versus Wade did not stand for that proposition. Roe versus Wade said that the government has a compelling interest in protecting life. They just arbitrarily, remember moral gerrymandering? They arbitrarily drew the line at viability. The question in the Dobbs case is whether all pre-viability abortions are unconstitutional. This is all about life. So that case did not ever say that women have a right constitutionally to abortion. It said that women have a right to privacy in healthcare decision makings that cover some abortions in some circumstances. We have to dispel that myth. And also, that case said, and there is no right to privacy even articulated in the Constitution, because the Constitution doesn't actually give us our rights. Our rights come from God, our Creator. The sole purpose of government is to preserve and protect those rights. So the right to privacy doesn't cover anything in the home that is illegal or immoral, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing, they're going to tell you that people like Michael don't get a say in this. Why? Because he's a guy. He can't get pregnant.
You didn't ask me if I'm. They have to ask me first
but
now,
Seth
right?
Seth said that the prophecies come true. Babylon
Yeah,
B.
yeah,
Yeah, so he can get pregnant. Sorry.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, but
Yeah.
So. But Jen Psaki, you saw call out a reporter and say, "Oh, you're not going to ever have this experience." Well, I actually agree with her, because you know what? Roe versus Wade was decided by 7 men. So it needs to be overturned right now.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Thank you. That was beautiful. That's a good point. And even a great, not only a lawyer's perspective, but a woman's perspective, so you can tell all your friends, I heard it from my woman friend. It's totally fine. But even, you talk about this right to privacy. Where do you find the generalized right to privacy in the Constitution? The Supreme Court says it's in the emanations of the penumbras of the invisible ink that we found in between. It's just bogus. And so I think just on every aspect, the moral, the biological, the legal, the facts are on our side. And I think you need to get them to admit their honest argument and see it as ghastly as it really is.
So I'm from New Jersey.
I was conceived in New Jersey. That's probably too much information for everybody here, but I wish I didn't know that myself. But
what are some ways that conservatives in New Jersey can fight back? Because it feels like an uphill battle right now with the whole King Murphy
what are you
going on.
talking about? You just won that great race where you beat the president of the New Jersey State Senate and a Republican truck driver won it. I agree. Not a whole lot of political power will come as a result of that, but it does show you, actually, that there are ways to win specific races. And don't forget, the Democrat there, Sweeney, tried to steal that race, and he found a whole bunch of ballots at 3 a.m., 3 days later, but it didn't work, and he ultimately was forced to concede. The thing to remember about a place like New York or New Jersey, I'm from New York myself, if the swarthy skin and slicked hair couldn't tell that to you. And there is, a lot of people don't know this, there is a kind of conservatism to a lot of parts of New Jersey and New York. It's different than, Lynchburg, Virginia conservatism. It's different than Alabama conservatism. It is different, but there is a base level of kind of no-nonsense, politically incorrect, love your country, wave your flag conservatism there. And so you need to be able to speak to that in a way that's not going to work in other places. And Youngkin, I think, is a good example of this. Youngkin did not run the Chamber of Commerce campaign. He kind of started to, and then he ran a cultural campaign at the end. But he ran as a cultural right-wing conservative warrior, but on a specific issue. Had he run on abortion, a very important issue, he would have lost. Had he run on marriage, overturning Obergefell, he would have lost. We might have liked that. Had he run as the reincarnation of Donald Trump, we might have liked that too. He would have lost. But he ran on education, which was a cultural issue that really matters and affects all those other ones, but it's an issue where you can pull people over. And so I think we're called to be innocent as a dove and wise as a serpent. And very often Republican politicians are wise as a dove and innocent as a serpent, and so that's why they lose. But I think we need to be clever about it, and we need to be prudent in our attacks. And I do think there is a base level of conservatism there. You just have to tap into it in a unique way. And I'm sorry to say, you do need to temper your expectations. But there is still some hope for improvement.
Hello, my name is Nick Salanides. I'm a sophomore here. And my question is, you say that economics is downstream from culture. If we take that metaphor a step further, and as a sophomore here and my fellow peers and I really wanting to enact change in this world and combat the craziness that the left is kind of pushing upon us, if we take that a step further, what's upstream? Is it culture or is it education that we should really dive into to get after it?
Well, the font of all of this is religion. You know, culture and cult come from the same root word, so what a culture worships is going to define that culture. And so it does begin with religion. There is no such thing as a separation of church and state. There never has been in the history of the world, and there isn't now. You know, now our official state religion is progressivism, and it has religious tenets. You know, the idea that a man can become a woman, the idea that you should pursue whatever sexual desire you have, you know, and really that you must pursue it. So these are all religious, the new religious views of race and all of that. So I think you got to get that settled first. Then there are the cultural questions. The one thing I would caution people, though, is for a long time, the whole politics is downstream of culture thing has been used as an excuse for Republican politicians not to do anything. They say, like, oh, it's up to you to make movies. It's up to you to do music. No, it's up to you. I elected you, buddy. How about you do your job and actually protect my rights and actually enact the will of the people in accordance with justice and the Constitution? So, you know, I think that what is wanted in all of this, you can be an economist, you can be a truck driver, you can be a politician, you can be a filmmaker. You know, we need all of that in our society. We need to walk and chew gum at the same times. What is required, though, in all of these endeavors is culture, or is courage, rather, which is not merely a virtue, but it's the prerequisite for all of the other virtues. And if we infused all of these aspects of society with a touch more courage, I think we could get a lot more done. Yeah. I think we have time for probably about one more question. Right.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much. I really loved your speech, and I've seen a couple of your segments on YouTube, and it was great. So this question's on behalf of a friend who couldn't make it, but for 2024, on both sides of the aisle, who do you believe will be the ideal candidates?
2020, well, I think 501c3 regulations at Liberty prevent me. Yeah, there we are. It also gets me out of a dicey position, because I voted for Trump, you know, in the general. I host a podcast with Ted Cruz. I do half my speaking events in Florida, where I think someone might be trying to run for president, too. So, you know, there are a lot of people. I reckoned former Secretary of State may have spoken at this very conference, and so there are a lot. I think there are. What I mean by that is, I think that there are a lot of good candidates. I'm not going to pick a horse just yet. I think a primary process is going to have to play out, but. Regardless of whether it's Trump or it's not Trump, I think everyone who is a serious contender right now has gotten the message from Trump. And the message from Trump is, 1, lean heavy into the culture. 2, ignore the media and actually attack the media because they are the opposition party. So we saw it a little bit from Newt or Pat Buchanan or, you know, various Reagan kind of knew it. Candidates over the years, Trump took it to a real extreme. We recognize that it's not just one party versus the other party, but actually there's this kind of establishment blob that involves the woke corporations and the universities and the media and big tech and all of it. And corporations are not our friend, and we don't need to just shill for some billionaire to get another tax break. That's not going to help us. So I think they've all learned that kind of lesson. But I think what most is called for with these kinds of candidates is to ditch the old script. You know, it's the old script in terms of the talking points. It's the old script in how you talk about it. It's even the old script in terms of policy. Something Trump does not get enough credit for is he changed policy on the right. He actually dissented from policy. Everyone thought it was just about his personality. I think a lot of it was because he was offering a different view on trade. He was offering a different view on immigration. He was offering a different view on all of these things. And so the big takeaway there for me, and you're seeing it represented in Blake Masters in Arizona and J.D. Vance in Ohio, and Josh Mandel in Ohio for that matter too. For a long time, we made an idol out of GDP. We made an idol out of economics and egg heads and bean counting. No. The economy is here to serve the country. There is something bigger than GDP. That is the nation. And you're not going to have a strong nation if you don't have strong borders and a strong culture and something held in common and strong families as well. And so that's got to be it. You can't put the cart before the horse anymore. All the successful candidates are going to get that. Thank you very much, everybody. Pleasure to be with you all. Thank you. Thank you.